also quite therapeutic to do something physical that doesn't require all of the sort of extra noise and thinking of my day-to-day job.
Awesome. Do you have any favorite car in mind then? That you
I
dream
have
car,
to,
maybe?
my dream car. I
Yeah.
would love.
Yeah.
I would say like a Callaway customized Corvette for sure.
Wow.
Would love.
Yeah, that would be
Would love.
That's definitely a dream
That's
car
the
for
project
sure.
car
Yeah.
for retirement maybe,
Yeah.
if we get there.
Currently, I'm actually working on a 1978 Corolla SR5.
Nice.
That's my current
Nice.
project car. Doing really well in that department.
My dad has a 1967 Barracuda.
Wow. That's
that's
nice
his.
car. Yeah. Really? That's very interesting.
I think
One
we're
of our
gonna go
other
to Miss
teachers.
Mastrato's house because she says she has a 1969 Camaro.
Yes, we should
I-
probably go check that
I'm
out.
gonna go hang out over there.
Exactly. All right.
Today's episode of the FICE podcast, hosted by St. E's, Educate to Elevate. How can we uplift our students, teachers, and communities? Our hosts are diving into the world of our 21st century education system with special guest Principal Martina Fasano, who's been an educator for over 20 years. How did she find a pathway to success? Not to mention how her 2024 Spotify wrap-up looks. She has a wealth of knowledge about school improvement, investing in your future, and performing live on stage. With a background and experience as diverse as her, today she'll be joining us unfiltered. Hear about all this and more on today's episode of The FICE.
So we're ending 2024 here with quite the bang. We have a lot going on. We have our marketing fair. We have a lot of CPTs starting, and we have a lot of extra school curriculars also happening, and a lot of competitionings finishing up. Since we're ending 2024 on a good beat, and we're wrapping up with a lot of our student body have gotten their Spotify wrap up playlist and their mentions. Do you have any background in music or anything along those lines? And again, do you have a Spotify wrap up you mind sharing with us?
Absolutely. So yes, I do have a background in music. I started playing an instrument when I was in the 6th grade. Started with tenor saxophone, believe it or not. And did that until the 9th grade. I added piano in that little bit of time. I'm not good at playing the piano. I got bored really quickly with that because I could be louder with the saxophone than I could with the piano. So to be quite honest, it kind of went that route.
Yeah.
In grade 9, I switched over to alto saxophone because it's smaller and a lot less heavy to carry home. And I added guitar along the way, which kind of became my primary instrument moving forward. So in terms of music, kind of started out more from a classically trained orchestral kind of background, and then into rock guitar, which is kind of the opposite in that world. So, and the opposite in terms of the kind of self-discipline or the kind of people that you're interacting with as well. So in playing in some cover bands and whatnot, I developed a nickname. They used to call me the accountant.
Okay, so you played in cover
They
bands
used
before.
they used to call me the
Yeah.
accountant because I was
That's
very
cool.
much from an orchestral background. I was used to, you go in,
Mm-hmm.
you play whatever it is, whatever show, you pack up your instrument, you make sure things are clean and ready to go, and then you just go home. The rock music world is a little bit different that way. It's like, oh, why don't you stay? And there's a party after the gig. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. So, so that part was kind of an adjustment,
that.
but
Yep.
that's where the nickname comes from. So my Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah, do you
I
have
always,
any
I do. I
recommendations?
wait for it every year because I'm like,
It's
I wonder
exciting.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's the number itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like 24,000 minutes or whatever streamed. I'm like, wow. Because
a
I'm
lot,
thinking
yeah.
back to when music was a more physical, tactile thing. And I can't, unless you had that CD or that vinyl record, you weren't going to be, or the cassette tape, you weren't going to be listening to that song unless you caught it on the radio. Whereas now, if I remember something or I hear something on a commercial, I'm like, oh, I remember that song, and then I can just look it up. So it's like an on-demand kind of culture, and that impacts everything. So Spotify Wrapped for me this year, some of the off the top of my head, Billie Eilish, Madonna, Guns N' Roses.
Amazing.
So you can see the variety there.
Diverse, yeah.
You can go from orchestral classical pieces and opera all the way to, very aggressive kind of metal music and everything in between.
And Madonna as well. You got
Absolutely.
legend herself
Yes.
there also.
Absolutely.
That's great. Like I said, that's awesome to hear such a diverse background in music. Me, myself, I've only maybe done 1 or 2 piano lessons. I do have a guitar, but I don't know much but Seven Nation Army on it.
That's okay.
I know, it's quite the funny statement to the musicians out there.
Hey investors, updates on this week's upcoming events include our JA Canada Investment Competition, in which we have officially begun our 3rd week this Monday, December 16th, and will continue over the next 4 weeks. Be sure to check your stocks. Keep on investing.
So, to continue with that conversation, what are your thoughts then? With such a diverse background in music, what are your thoughts on the Morning Rush song? And do you have any comments or considerations when it comes to that song? Maybe changing or, again, incorporating new ideas for it?
Yeah.
And how often do they change the Morning Rush song?
So that's one of those, when you are appointed to a school as a principal,
Yeah.
you usually inherit whatever's already in place for the Morning Rush song.
Very
so in
similar
some
to teachers.
absolutely. So
Yep.
in some schools, they have different councils. Like every year, they'll vote on a new one, and then that's the song for the year or for the semester. Whereas you have some schools where it's been the same song, literally for decades.
Yeah.
We play the William Tell Overture in the morning by composer Rossini, a very familiar one to me, because it was the Morning Rush song when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And that was not a couple years ago. We're just going to leave it at that. So what you really want out of a Morning Rush song is that it becomes, it elicits a response, and the desired response is to get everybody to class on time.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple things. Number one, the song has to be the right length, because it can't go over or below the time. And that end part of the overture actually is exactly the right amount of time. So that's why it's been used for so long. And it's also the kind of music that signals to you, like, I should probably get moving.
Yeah.
If you play something that's a little bit too laid back, there'll be people chilling in the hallway, but no one's going to class. So, I mean, if you're going to choose something that is inclusive of all the people in the building, you got to choose something that, of course, doesn't have lyrics that could be considered inappropriate and all this kind of stuff, which eliminates a bunch of the songs and all the things that we love to listen to as people, right? Because I think The Trooper by Iron Maiden works perfectly.
That'd
That's
be
5
amazing.
minutes long. That's perfect. That'll
Yeah.
get people moving to class. But I'm sure that there will be, complaints about, like, that's probably not the direction we want to go. So we do thematic ones. Like, so for example, leading up to Halloween, they change them a little bit. Or leading up to like Spirit Week, they change them a little bit. So I'm open to those things as long as the music serves the purpose, which is to signal you should start heading to class.
Awesome. Well, to even bring it back a little bit, like you're saying, I remember in my high school, we had Mission Impossible. That was our theme song for the entire 4 years I was there.
Yep.
It got, like I said, I probably know that song back to front at this point.
Yep.
And relating, our business right now, actually, our business department, we are focusing on the call to action. As you can see, a lot of our festivities are up right now and happening this week. You guys will probably hear it in the ad break as well. Again, we're trying to focus on this call to action, making sure our students feel empowered and they're feeling ready to go in whatever subjects they do want to take on, and they feel like they have that incentive to actually go and do that. So again, Morning Rush song is more. It sounds like there's a lot more that goes into it than just playing it over the speaker there.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Are big after the COVID pandemic on collecting shoes and shoe brands in general. Do you have any recommendations for any shoes that you like, any shoes that you feel comfortable? Definitely after playing on a live stage for so long, you definitely need the utility of a good shoe that you can rely on. Do you have any recommendations or any, again, kind of favorites when it comes to performing and when it comes to wearing shoes in general?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, one of the things, especially if you're actually performing, you need to have stable footing. because stages are not all created equal. And, we've seen, unfortunately, in the industry sometimes, big mistakes or tragedies happen. And that's with a professional, kind of setup. So imagine if you're playing at, a local sort of smaller venue that kind of doubles as also like part restaurant, part bar, part this, part that. And then they just have some risers that have been there for God knows how long. So, and you get on stage and you can actually feel they kind of like moving around a bit, and that's never a good feeling. So I tend to wear Doc Marten boots or Chuck Taylor Converse running shoes.
Nice. Woo!
Those I wear pretty much all the time, even at work.
Yes.
And I will neither confirm nor deny how many pairs of those I have, just in case,
I can kind of relate in a similar sense. I used to do competitive skateboarding.
Yeah.
And during that time, we were pretty much mandatorily had to wear either flat Converse.
Yes.
Got used
Or
to my
Vans.
pants, or Vans.
Love
yes.
those too. I have a couple pairs
Exactly.
of Vans too.
Recently, actually, I've been switching over. I started doing competitive downhill biking, and with downhill biking, you also need very flat shoes. They do have their own brands that they recommend,
Yep.
but what I found the most comfortable are the new Nike Blazers.
Oh,
The
wow,
Blazers
okay.
are quite nice. They feel like Converse, but they just have more support around the ankles, which I like.
Is very important,
And they're leather.
especially for principals of a certain age. You need more ankle support. I agree. I'm in favor of this.
Especially when you're young like yourself, you definitely need a little bit more style. When it comes
Yes,
to that
yes.
Ankle support.
We'll go.
Exactly.
Yes, ankle support and style. We'll go with that one.
Exactly. Again, the leather also helps when it comes to any falling or anything like that,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to mountain biking.
And you can dress them up. If they're leather, you can accessorize.
Congratulations to our FLC Waterloo competitors. The competition was completed on December 5th during Period 3. Great job, everyone. Students are recommended to go through their resources and review Canadian financial policies for 2024 for next semester's competition. Make sure to check back on our Google Classroom for any additional upcoming information and dates. Back to the podcast.
Again, you have such a diverse background, Ms. Fasano. A lot of our students are looking to get into their university program. A lot of students have already been accepted into a lot of their university programs. And coming recently, having just graduated myself only a couple of years ago, I would love to hear your pathway when it comes to how you actually slowly came into the position of principal. And if you have any recommendation for my students, a lot of them are getting nervous thinking this is the do-all, be-all of their careers here. In a sense, they have to make the decision now, and they don't have much wiggle room when it comes to university, when it comes to their pathways to achieving the success and goals that they have set out for themselves. Do you have any recommendations? What is the difference between the pathway to becoming a principal versus the experience you actually had becoming a principal?
So the good news is that you don't have to decide now.
Okay.
And it's not linear. I believed when I first started out, my university career began at the Schulich School of Business. I was in business administration. I did that for 2 years.
Fellow Yorkie,
Yes.
also went to York. Let's go.
And I slowly started to kind of feel like this is not where I feel myself ending up. Based on some of the work experiences and whatnot that I had, I thought I can't be in a place every day where there isn't creativity happening, where there isn't a little bit of noise, where there isn't a little bit of chaos, and a little bit of fun. So in many office settings, you're not really, you're not around those things. And I had fought going into education for many years. I was in high school during a time that was quite tumultuous in Ontario education. I would argue not too different really than we are right now, except there were a lot more strikes, there were a lot more labor issues. And I thought to myself, I don't know that I want to be involved in all of that all the time. But I also really loved writing. I loved doing all these things. I'm thinking, and I would love to help young people be in a school environment that I thought a school should be. My whole thing was, if I'm going to be in a school, I want it to look different than some of the school that I experienced. So I felt like if I can't change that, then there's no point in me being there.
You've changed it into quite the positive influence.
So so 2 years into business school, it was actually my mother who pulled me aside. I happened to be doing I was covering a mat leave at her office. And that's an education that is, you can't get that in a classroom. You can't get it at school. Being surrounded by, business people that these were, urban planners and designers who had started a firm and brought it from nothing to one of Canada's most preeminent ones. And, a world where billable hours reigns supreme, very different than the world that I was used to. So being in that environment, I remember my mom, pulling me aside, and she asked me to, to head into the boardroom because she wanted to have a chat with me. And, my mother's a lovely woman, but her work persona is not the person that you would want to meet in a boardroom. So when she summoned me to the boardroom, I was not, I was like, oh no, I'm like, no, I can't get in trouble here too. Like, it's not bad enough at home. Like now we're going in the boardroom. This is like next level. So, and she said to me, you're miserable in the program that you're in. And I have no idea who or what you think you're trying to prove to yourself or anybody else. But if you're not happy there, you're not going to be very good at what you do once you graduate anyway. And I don't understand why someone who loves creative things is trying to fit themselves into this box of, office cubicles. So why don't you just switch programs and do something that you really enjoy? Which shocked me because I thought she was I don't know what she was gonna say, really, to be honest. So I made the switch from business administration to fine arts cultural studies.
Awesome.
Which is, if you had to pick two opposite sort of extremes, that was it. And then from there into the Faculty of Education.
Well, actually, if you want to explore that a little bit more, I do have a familiar background in the fine arts program. I actually took as my major the fine arts program at York. It was great. I loved it more than anything. Like I said, it let me explore so many diverse topics and so many diverse fields. I had to do anything from painting and digital drawing and graphic design to actually welding. I got my welding certification there as well. So like I said, I started off as well more in a business program originally, and then oriented myself towards the fine arts also. I also got to engage with a lot of computer engineers and things along those lines. So we got to see a lot of new tech.
Yes.
Hey Panthers, remember to bring your money for this upcoming market fair, Thursday, December 12th. Treats, accessories, and more will be sold during this festive holiday market. It will be held during all lunches outside the cafeteria. Support our students' small businesses while claiming those last-minute shopping gifts. Back to the podcast.
Before we do that, so we just want to, again, going back to what we were talking about before, like you were saying, you have a lot of different there's a lot of different incentives and a lot of different pathways you could have. So according to the Ontario government, the average path to becoming a principal is extensive, and it usually requires about 5 additional years of teaching experience on top of a lot of different diverse certifications and specialties, including an honors. During that time, like you said, you probably got to explore a lot of different job fields, and that's what I'd start recommending to our students as well. Again, we have some students around here who are listening as well. I would recommend, like she was saying, just exploring different job opportunities, coming fresh out of teachers college. Myself, I was able to explore a lot of different jobs fields while still in school. Having online learning now and having that hybrid model does allow us to be both in the classroom and exploring different experiences throughout the area and communities around us, which is always great to see. And it's great to explore not only as an individual, but just experience it together with other people. Again, I have some background when it comes to paramedics and EMR. I also have a little bit of background when it comes to Toronto bars, especially as well too. I didn't do the live music, but I did do a little bit of security when I was down there, and we had
That's its own beast.
Yes, it is. Let's just say I was a little bit young at the time, but it was a great experience in the sense I did get first-hand view what it's like when it comes to the nightlife in Toronto, which is always fun to explore, and it's always fun, again, just to have a background in all these different diverse fields, so you know what what you're into and knowing what you like to get involved with when it comes to your communities outside of your school environments. What do you think, again, just hearing of all these different backgrounds and different people who not only influenced your life, but made a positive change on how you, again, viewed a lot of things going on when it came to your pathway to success? What do you feel best prepared you overall for your role as a principal now? Any life experience, any things that, again, you would go over education-wise that you would maybe want our students to know about?
Yeah, I think if you can, the advice I have is to have as many different experiences as you can. Work in a bunch of different places. Work in an office, work in a kitchen, work in an auto shop, which I did because my dad's a mechanic, so I was around that and kind of took a sort of side business from him. I made my own small business within his business. So I was doing car and auto detailing at the time during the summers in between my years in university. So, it's be exposed to the things that are going to make you a well-rounded person, because as a leader of anything, not just a school, but as a person too, just in general, the more you know what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, the more you can relate to people.
Yeah.
And we've got AI, we've got all kinds of automated things, we have computers, we have a lot of things that are not human, but the way to success, in my view, is still to be able to relate to other human beings. That part is very difficult for AI to do effectively.
Yeah, and that leads us actually into our next topic. So our next topic we want to discuss with you about actually is the ever-changing environment of the classroom and how exactly we are going to be incorporating this. So like we were talking about previously, in this environment, we have a lot of changing technology in both our classroom and just in the academic environment in general. Okay? We're trying to move into the 21st century when it comes to both our classrooms, our education, and the overall budget that we put forward for our school boards. As of October 2024, we have a statistic actually coming in.
67.5% of the world's population have access to the internet. With ever-changing and growing technology, how do we make this education accessible to everyone?
Yeah, so like we see in our classrooms, we have a lot of technology now that we're able to use. We have a lot of, again, not only connections to the internet, we have connections to other parts of the globe, which is great to see. We're becoming much more diverse in the experiences we're able to bring into the classroom. How, in your experience, do you see this change, and where do you see this change kind of going for the future here?
Yeah, this is, I would argue that the COVID pandemic, for all of its, the horrible things that it brought to the world, I will say that it forced the education world to adopt and adapt to the technology that exists. Because when everyone is at home and the only option you have is to go through Google Meet to meet people and to have a class, the first thing that, the question that you ask, because I remember being in those meetings with, senior administration and other principals, vice principals, how are we going to get the classroom into everyone's home?
Yeah, and you've probably
when
seen
not everyone has a device.
Exactly.
So that kind of pushed everyone forward, whether they liked it or not, whether you had people that were reluctant to use technology or not, whether budgets were able to afford it or not. There was no choice. And when there's no choice, it's almost as though we as humans, we react two ways. We either give up or we innovate. And I'm glad that innovation is usually the one that kind of wins out over time, because when given no choice, you must do something, So I think it was Winston Churchill that once said, it's not good enough that we do our best. Sometimes you have to do what's required. And sometimes that means it's going to be a horrible experience, but it's necessary. And so that was where we got pushed. But then we got pushed, and then we all came back to school. And so my question is, so now what? So now we have the things, just look at the setup that we have for this podcast. Even, I'm going to say, having done some podcasting and blogging in my own life, 10 years ago, this setup would not have been able to develop the quality podcast that you've been able to develop. You would have needed a setup that was far larger, far more expensive to do even close to what is now capable. And that's what we see even with some of our students that are, whether they're in rap or in certain SHISM programs. You can create with very minimal equipment.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of our students now, not only do they explore the music area and in a sense record themselves, have their own studio set up at home, a lot of them too are starting to incorporate the internet and getting connected with these communities through either streaming, things along those lines, just being able to form a community online. We're starting to see that slowly evolve just with, again, all this changing technology.
Absolutely.
And the minimal amount of technology you actually need to start getting involved in it.
When you think of all of some of the major stars of, the music world right now, they were launched after someone noticed them on their YouTube channel. That was unheard of, 30, 40 years ago, unless you got your demo into the hands, like your demo tape or whatever, into the hands of a record company executive, and, making an actual album and a record deal. Like, you would never have been noticed. There's countless artists that, because of poor promotion on the part of the record company, never got noticed. That it's really easy to think, I wonder what it would have looked like now. I wonder if, someone like Sixto Rodriguez, who most people probably don't know, but who is really, the ball was dropped by the American component of his record company, touted to be possibly the next Bob Dylan or someone like Bruce Springsteen, but no one knew who he was until way later in the game. But in Australia, where his album was promoted in the 70s, he was a huge star.
Yeah, that's
so, but, think of Justin Bieber. He started on YouTube.
Yeah, you're right. In the sense that, and not only did he start on YouTube, now he's a global icon in that sense. Yeah, and we're starting to see a lot of pickup, especially with these social medias now. When it comes to TikTok, Instagram, creating a brand for yourself and promoting yourself has become much more, I would say, easier to get involved with as students. It's still important, again, to be aware of that brand you are putting out there and making sure it is how you want to be seen, because once things are out there, they are out there permanently in that sense. So, talking from that experience, you've seen that, you've probably seen technology evolve from the beginning to where it is now. Do you, again, have any, I wouldn't say favorites, but do you have any kind of things you want to shout out when it comes to technology? Some new things you've seen in classrooms and some things that are, again, kind of new and innovative even to you nowadays that are, again, maybe making you go, wow, I didn't even know that was kind of possible.
I think that a lot of the things that are going on related to integrating technology into what you're doing so that the technology takes away the burden of the things that would take up your time and focus so that you can focus on the actual learning pieces of it. It's huge. I mean, I'm looking right now at the setup you have here.
Yes, this classroom is quite active.
The car
the
car simulator, racing simulator. And
built by our students, our computer engineering students. We do have a racing simulator in our classroom over here.
And that is like things like that. And for like gamification for a purpose, because I've studied looking at some, you gamify a classroom, it doesn't necessarily translate to better student achievement. There has to be a reason and an end goal that you're pursuing, right? And so the part of technology now, like the thing with education in general and most public sector industries, is that their primary concern is to ensure that the citizens are safe, that they are accounted for in terms of cared for, ideally, and that you're not doing things too quickly. So public sector doesn't tend to move quickly. They tend to respond. They set policy, they set laws, and the laws are often playing catch up to technology. It's been that way for forever. So you won't see in public education these big sort of innovations initially, but then when they happen, they take off, because young people generally are innovative because they haven't been told, or they haven't felt that, well, they can't do something. They've been empowered to, well, you're supposed to be creative and have an imagination when you're young.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you allow that to actually run its course, I think that's the way to sort of embracing what that 21st century classroom, could and should look like.
Hey listeners, this is Mr. Edgecombe, and I'm here with a brief and special message during this ad break. I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank my incredible podcast team for their dedication and hard work in creating this episode and all the previous ones. I'd also like to express my gratitude to you, our listeners, for your amazing support and feedback as we embark on this new podcast journey. I'd also like to extend my thanks to the inspiring guests who have joined us so far. Your insights and stories have been extremely valuable, and this podcast wouldn't be possible without the rich experiences you've shared. A special shout out goes to Mr. Mansell and Ms. Fasano for their encouragement, which has been instrumental in helping us maintain this momentum. We're thrilled about what's ahead and excited to share it with you. Going forward, we'll be releasing new episodes bi-weekly on Mondays, so stay tuned. Enjoy the break, and as always, let's get back to the podcast.
I mean, I'll tell you, I remember walking into my classroom at the start of the semester. It was semester 2 of my, I'm going to say my second last year in the classroom. I didn't know it at the time, but I walked in and some of the students, started to file in. It was a grade 10 applied history class. And I had one of the students say, "Oh, I heard that you're the fun teacher." And at the time, I was kind of, I'm not going to lie, I was sort of horrified. I'm like, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that, like, it's a joke in here? Because I can't have that. And then, so I asked, I'm like, what do you mean exactly? "No, miss, I heard, like, that you're the one that does, like, those simulations and stuff." So he wasn't lying. I did, because to me, there's no point in just sitting there and absorbing it. Like, teachers are no longer the knowledge holders or knowledge keepers.
Exactly.
And the sooner that we get away from that as an entire education system, then I think the better it will be.
I do agree. I am doing a master's right now, and that's kind of what I'm exploring, in the integration of technology and how we're kind of moving away from the knowledge base format, and we're moving into the critically thinking and developing our positions on a lot of the information that's now readily available to not only our students but to everyone involved. And
then not being afraid when the students do think critically.
Exactly.
Because this is what happens. If you have, part of the job of the principal is to amplify student voice.
Exactly.
But when you look at how schools were designed and how they operate, many people will try to say, we're going to change schools. And the reason why it's difficult to change schools is because schools are running exactly the way they were intended to run.
Exactly.
They were not created as spaces for critical thinking. They were created originally back in, the 1800s to have the relative masses be able to experience some kind of education, so that way they could be compliant, obedient members of the workforce. The thing is that right now in this era, with so many people, self-employed, and our economy has grown and changed so much since the 1800s. But if you walk into an old school, if you see pictures of schools in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, unfortunately, they don't really look that much different than the way schools look today. Even when they build them, they look very institutional. And so you can't expect that magically it's going to be this place where innovation and thinking is the most prized, valued thing. Because initially they were created, to kind of, how many of you remember those art projects in elementary school? I'm going to ask you to raise your hands, okay? You remember when the teacher used to show you, right? Okay, today we're going to do the pumpkin with the tissue paper. And they would show you the exemplar. Oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. And then at the end of the day, you would have 25 pumpkins with the tissue paper that look exactly the same. How many people remember that?
I remember that, yeah.
Okay, right. So what we're trying to do, in the metaphorical sense, the way I see it is, I'm going to show you that these are the materials we're going to use, and we're going to make a pumpkin. But I hope at the end of the day that everyone has a very different pumpkin.
Exactly. Again, it's the approach. The approach
That's
is
the goal.
very important. Very important. Just bringing it back a little bit, as you're saying. So a lot of our tech is helping to simplify a lot of things. We actually have a question from one of our students directed at that. Yeah.
Yeah, so do you think technology will help education and budgeting become more efficient and simple, and in what ways?
I sure hope so. I know that there are many tools that could help us run things more efficiently, even in our day-to-day. Even for me, like as a principal, when I get all these meeting requests and everyone wants to meet, or I need to sign things or whatever, there are all kinds of AI-based personal assistants, let's say, that allow you input all the things. You don't tell it when or what. You just say, this is what I have all these meeting requests. And what it does is it creates a situation where your calendar is optimized for productivity. Mm-hmm. The problem is that a lot of those apps and things aren't necessarily, in terms of privacy and their terms and conditions, aren't really necessarily in line with the safety net that has to be public education. So you can't utilize them. So my worry is that students and that staff, that we fall behind. So we have to kind of use the tools that we have and exploit those as much as we can, so that we can kind of be innovative within the confines that we're given, right? We can't just give up and say, oh, I can't do it, so forget it. I can't use this AI tool, but I can use this one. So how can I use this one to maybe mimic the one that I want to use but can't, due to, all kinds of privacy concerns or whatever else, in terms of the actual structure of the technology, like of the system itself. The network has to be safe so that you can log on and do your work and not have to worry about instability or viruses or people stealing your identity.
Yep.
Because it's very common for people that are into bad things to want to steal the identity of young people. Does anyone know why?
Oh, we talk about this quite a bit. Do any of our students right now, student leaders?
Why
for
would
crew?
we want to steal your identity?
Yeah. Do you guys have any suggestions here?
Maybe to take access, impersonate us, take access of our identity.
Yeah, and why would they want to do that?
Specifically with students.
How many of you here have a credit card? Probably no one, correct? That is in your name that you've applied for, which means that you have a credit score and a credit record that is absolutely clean.
Amazing.
And bad people
Yeah.
that have poor credit and that are, maybe criminals in terms of financial fraud and whatever else, they know that. If they take your name and they run that through the credit score system, so, oh, this is clean, perfect. And then they take out loans or debt or whatever in your name, which that's why the school board has to protect all of your usernames, your student numbers and everything else, because they're attached to your birth date, they're attached to your OEN, which is your Ontario, like the student number, all of those things. And then when you go out there in the world, it's easy for them to use a perfectly sparkling clean credit for anyone. If they steal everyone, like anyone who's in kindergarten right now, and they take all those names and take out false or really bad loans in all of those people's names, they probably won't find out until they first go buy a house or get a credit card or get a car loan or anything like that, or student loan. And then you realize, oh my God, like my identity was taken. So that's one of the things. We want to advance what we do in our schools and want to advance what we do with technology, but we have to be really careful because there's bad people out to steal the information of young people.
Yeah, exactly. A couple.
Because you guys are perfect for it.
Do you
Exactly.
use AI for any of your day-to-day duties or no?
I use a little bit of AI in some of my productivity management stuff. Like I use the app Todoist, which kind of itemizes and sort of streamlines, to-do lists and whatnot.
Yeah. And to stem off of that, actually, so like I was talking about, we've recently been exploring in my master's program a lot about AI and how to incorporate a lot of different elements, a lot of different things. A lot of my students like saying, oh, sir, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Again, a lot of these programs, a lot of these things, it's not just about finding the information itself, but it's being able to divulge and actually use that information effectively. Like, again, probably with your when it comes to scheduling things along those lines, you still have to make sure everything fits perfectly afterwards, correct?
Yeah.
I like to relate it a lot of the times. Again, we are covering a lot of what you're talking about right now in the business unit itself. I like to relate it a lot. A lot of my students can probably relate to this as well. A lot of you guys can probably relate to this also. Have you guys ever had an open book test before? Yes? I'm guessing you guys all have had an open book test before.
Yep.
Have you guys gotten perfect on that open book test?
No.
Why haven't you guys gotten perfect? All the information is there. You should be able to get perfect on it, right? Again, it's the role of the education here to not only get the knowledge, but be able to critically think and find the knowledge you actually need for the task you're going to be performing. So as much as AI does help us, again, there is that element of the classroom, of the learning environment that you have to be involved with to actually critically analyze and be progressive in your academic path to success.
And your intellectual property as well.
Exactly.
So you can, anytime you prompt AI with something and you give it information, AI now has that information and it'll use that information to answer someone else's question. So the great thing is that, yeah, it may make things easier, but especially if you're working in places where there's privacy and sensitivity to information is important, like a school board, or some corporations too. If I use AI to try and generate my report to the shareholders, I've just given AI all of the confidential information and data in my corporation. That's problematic because there's nothing more sacred in some of those spaces than the innovations that they've come up with. That's intellectual property. That's why they pay those people all that money. So example, if I say I want this letter, I want these awards printed out, and I'm going to give you a list of student names, and this is the award, and this is the certificate I want generated. Perfect, poof, it's done in a nanosecond. But now every single one of those names is out in that sort of meta universe, and that's problematic. So be careful where you go to work too, because you might use it as a shortcut, but use the one that your corporation allows, because that means they've already vetted it to make sure that anything that you're including in there is not just going to be ripped off by and shared to all the other different AI platforms.
Like I tell my grade 9s as well, we're covering this unit actually right now when it comes to data collection. Same with in my economics class as well. A lot of these big companies, they're not making their money on you just signing up for a platform for free. Amazon doesn't make its money necessarily by you guys signing up for it. It makes its money by the data it collects and then gives out to other companies.
Yep.
So just
if
remember.
If it's free,
yep.
I'm going to repeat this
Exactly.
for all the people listening. If the product is free, the product is you.
Exactly. Again, your information is very valuable and it's probably spread about. A scary thing to say, I don't mean to scare our viewers here a little bit, but a lot of us in the early 2000s, I always say this to my students as well, don't worry too much. As long as you're following the basic guidelines, you should be fine on the internet because, again, unfortunately, our data is probably already out there thanks to the early 2000s and us not really knowing how the internet worked necessarily. Our guardians, our parents, me, myself as well, we signed up for a lot of things that we probably shouldn't have signed up for necessarily. Again, we're
Like the
learning.
MySpace account.
The MySpace, exactly.
Delete.
Stuff along those lines. But we are slowly clearing that up. And again, we have these VPNs now that do help. We always recommend going online. And just
Hello again, listeners. Mr. Edgecombe. On behalf of our team, I'd like to extend a whole heartfelt thanks to Miss Mastrato, the head of our business department, for her unwavering support and guidance in spearheading this project. Her encouragement has been instrumental in helping our crew navigate and organize this incredible journey. For any student, learners, or guardians interested in our Business SHISM program, we warmly invite you to visit the business department and connect with us. We've always eager to hear your feedback and welcome new members to our ever-growing community. And now, like always, back to the podcast.
Yeah, so RAP applications are going on this week. Could you go into more depth on the St. Elizabeth RAP programs and RAP SHISM? Do you think it helps the future art students improve their performance and creation in the arts?
Absolutely. So the Regional Arts Program, RAP for short, and I would argue our SHISMs as well, are basically opportunities for people to grow in an area where they may already have proficiency, but also in an area where they may have what they may have a passion for. And I think it was Kevin O'Leary, one of the guy he's on Dragon's Den, who said that if he had to go back in this modern era to get a university degree in something aside from the finance one that he has, what would he choose? And he said that he would choose an arts degree. That shocked a lot of people. And his ideology behind that, his reasoning was because if you have a degree where you have learned how to create, you have something right now that everyone is seeking. We live in a very visual world. Videos are basically now the bare minimum that you need to be able to produce, even if you are running someone's social media marketing for their for Instagram. You need to be generating videos. It's not just about pictures anymore.
Yeah.
And so if you know how to create, if you know how to perform, you can succeed in whatever facet of life. We have students, the misconception is that if you go into the regional arts program that you graduate from here and you go on to do the fine arts. That happens in some cases, but we also have students that go in to study law. We go in to have students that study engineering, whether it's, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, whatever it is. Because when you have gone through, and I can attest to this myself, having been classically trained in music, there's a certain self-discipline and a certain sort of performance component that comes with it. Because for me, I remember, while you're practicing on your own, you can make all the mistakes you want. In rehearsal, you can afford to make some mistakes too. That's where you're all rehearsing together, like as a band, as a symphony, whatever it is. But when it's performance time, there is no room for mistakes. So someone who has weathered that kind of training, regardless of what job you have, that self-discipline becomes a part of who you are. And that's part of what we try to instill here, not just in the rap program, but even for schisms. Because you have the additional certifications, you are showing people that you committed to doing the things. You showed up. You did your certifications, you did the courses you said you were going to take, and that's why you get that red seal on your diploma. And all it is really, it's not so much about the red seal, it's not so much about being in rap, it's that when you leave here, you have a set of skills that no amount of degrees and schooling or apprenticeships can teach you. It's the self-discipline, it stays with you. Until the day you die, really, because it's the reason why I can still manage to, wake up at 5:30 and go to the gym 3 days a week.
That's impressive.
That's not.
I can't even go
I
on
don't
that.
like doing it.
Yeah.
Let's get that part out of the way. I don't like it, but the self-discipline piece becomes a part of who you are. So if you've committed to it and you're going to do it, really all you're letting down is yourself at that point if you don't go. So that's where those, for me, the regional arts program is a showcase of that. Yes, you get to be around all kinds of creative people, which changes the environment of a school. Having been in schools that don't have a regional arts program and you step foot in here, because it's palpable in the air, because creativity is allowed here.
Again, what a great response. We actually have one of our students who...
There are 13.7 million Canadians 25 or older who have completed post-secondary studies according to the data from the 2011 National Household Survey. Studying art in Canada equips individuals with creativity, critical thinking, community, and cultural understanding skills. How is that important to you? And do you think that St. Elizabeth's programs help students have a competitive edge during their application process to a post-secondary artistic job?
Absolutely. I think that it's an extremely important skill to be able to perform, to be quite honest. And I don't mean that necessarily on a stage. But how many times as, you could be, whether you're a mechanic and a car comes into the shop and the customer's upset because, well, I just had this repaired and now it's not working, so now what? This person's, they may be escalated. They may have already written you, some, or sent you an e-transfer for, thousands of dollars to fix this problem, and now there's something else wrong with the car. How do you take what you've learned, let's say, in a fine arts program to be able to respond to something like that? the good thing is about people that have been in any of the arts is that they're pretty good at thinking on their feet. They're also really good at fighting for what's right, because a lot of the times arts programs are the first on the chopping block, the same way that marketing is often first on the chopping block in corporations when things aren't going well financially. And it's a mistake that many companies make. It's like, okay, well, we're kind of, our profits are down, so like, let's look where we can cut. Where do we cut first? Well, do we need this many people in the marketing department? And you're getting rid of the people who have the creativity to be able to drive more business to your corporation, right? So in terms of, do I think this program prepares people for what's to come? Yes, absolutely. Anytime you talk to our alumni that come back to help out, or even just to be here at our shows, or to support the school, some of them have gone on to do incredible things in the arts, and others have gone on to do things that are not necessarily fine arts related, but yeah, absolutely. And or you get called into a meeting and say, hey, listen, like, these guys liked your idea better, so can you present the idea that you kind of told me in the hallway on the way to work this morning? And that background of having stood on stage in front of a full theater gives you the self-confidence to walk in. And it doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert. In fact, many fine arts people are not, but they're really good at being extroverted when they have to be, right? And to do a presentation, or to say, or to lead someone, because it's very common in the arts to have to, especially like in music or in dance, you're working with a group of people.
Exactly.
And in most jobs, you're going to be working with people, even if it's virtually or it's a hybrid model. You're working from home some of the time, working in person. But how you relate to people is really, really an important skill. Yeah. And being in the arts program definitely does that.
Again, that's amazing. Just from my own experience, again, I initially went to school for business, eventually moved over into the fine arts program. And again, my specialty revolved around computer engineering, computer science. So I did a lot of digital arts, which I really love to do. And like I said, especially when you get past the post-secondary and you start getting into the actual job field and stuff like that, they are always looking for the creative minds that help innovate and push forward, as you guys heard previously from some of these statements.
And the branding piece that you mentioned earlier is becoming more important. So having the skills to be able to create and develop and promote your own brand as a person is super, super important.
Knowing all this, do you have some advice for hobbies or programs that students who aren't in an art program can get involved in their daily lives outside of education?
Absolutely. I mean, we have so many clubs and councils in this building, and sports teams. Like, I get proposals weekly. Myself, Miss Joseph, Mr. Huang, we get so many, and there's so many opportunities. But even outside of this building, find something that brings you joy, find something that makes you happy, and don't be afraid to be a beginner at it, because that's where the learning comes from. The first time I picked up a guitar, it sounded absolutely atrocious. I would argue that if I picked one up now, it would probably still sound a little bit atrocious, but that's, do things that you be outdoors, be using your hands, do things that are completely opposite to the environment that you have during the day, because that gives you an outlet of sorts. I've always loved cars, I've always loved music, and so when the weather is not like it is right now outside, I will spend time. I wash my own car and I wax my own car and I do all that stuff because it matters to me, but it's also quite therapeutic to do something physical that doesn't require all of the sort of extra noise and thinking of my day-to-day job.
Awesome. Do you have any favorite car in mind then? That your
my dream car. I would love... I would say like a Callaway customized Corvette for sure.
Wow.
Would love.
Yeah, that would be that's definitely a dream car.
That's the project car for retirement maybe, if we get there.
Currently, I'm actually working on a 1978 Corolla SR5.
Nice.
That's my current project car. Doing really well in that department.
My dad has a 1967 Barracuda.
Wow. That's
nice his.
Car. Yeah. Really? That's very interesting.
I think we're going to go to Miss Mostrato's house because she says she has a 1969 Camaro.
Yes, we should probably go check that
I'm going to go hang out over there.
Exactly. All right. Well, again, Thank you, Ms. Fasano, for coming on our podcast. We appreciated you having some time and giving some insight to all of our students.
My pleasure.
Like I said, your voice does help our student voices be heard, and it helps answer some of the questions that may not get to the office necessarily, but at least you can address on our podcast here. Are there any closing remarks you would like to tell anyone or say anything to anyone?
Just keep on doing the things that bring you joy, but also be making good decisions. Don't think too much about, because I know the grade 12s especially will think about, well, if I make this, if I don't get into my first choice program or all these things. And I have to tell you, right now it feels like this gargantuan monster, and it's the biggest decision, and it's the be all and end all, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's not. It's going to be okay. I promise. Some of the most successful people I know were rejected from their first choice programs. They pivoted and they have become leaders in their respective industries. So,
Like yourself.
Please, well, I don't know about that, but I will say, but don't be afraid of change. Things are scary, and usually when they're scary is when you're supposed to kind of take that leap.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate you having on the podcast, and we'll take those words to heart, especially, again, coming from our administration staff. That does help a lot of our students out.
Thank you, Ms. Fasano, for coming on to our podcast today. It was very insightful and very helpful, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there will take this to heart. Yeah.
I had an awesome time. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you, and Vice out.